development of the event is the topic is current trends of regional development. We have several speakers and guests. Please allow us to introduce them. Natalia Zubarevich, economist geographer. Farukh Rahmatulovich Sultanov, country officer at the IFC in Tajikistan. Andrei Margolin Markich, Vice Rector, the Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Administration. Marcel Rubik Salikov, Chief Economic Director, Institute of Energy and Finance. And Ruslan Yerbulatov Dalenov is going to come a little bit later. He is Deputy Chairman of Eurasian Development Bank. Please allow us to start our event. As I said, regional development plays important role and is threatening the economic development, social, political development and stability. And recently we had jointly with Asian Bank of Development a big national social development. Ruslan Yerbulatov Dalenov just came over here. Please allow us to welcome you. I will continue. We recently had the national research on the perception of well-being, and we have identified number of the issues that are raised by our citizens is the low satisfaction by the financial status, the opportunities to be employed, the social infrastructure, and they have also highlighted the ecological and environmental problems. So that is why we're going to discuss those issues. And of course, the growth of the regional unevenness will bring to social tension, and we will discuss these issues. First question, please allow me to ask you, Natalia Vasilyevna. As I said, the problem of the regional unevenness has topical status. Do you have any universal recipes in decreasing the unevenness? Well, the answer to the question before you have asked, the regional difference is not the threat, is the opportunities to grow. It becomes threat when it becomes the, let's say, inequality in a major scale. The second thing, there are countries with the resources, is Russia, Kazakhstan, who a priori has inequality and advantages because of the territories, because of the VVP, because nobody is actually getting GDP because it's going to the treasury. And there's also inequality between the cities in the countries, the scales. For example, if you're living in a capital, everything is good, but for other cities, it's not the situation. So that is why we have inequality, and it is quite natural. For example, to men in Moscow, for you, it's the West, Astana, and Almaty. Those are the biggest regions and wealthiest ones. Uzbekistan, for example, has inequality because they don't have the resource rent and the feasibility. With the Russia and Kazakhstan, it's 0.6. Uzbekistan has 0.3. And on the dynamics, I'm going to elaborate later. The only country where there is no inequality is Belarus. Everything is good, nothing is changing, everything is stable, but the problem is the growth then. What is the policy? What do we do? Russian Federation, for example, growth of the inequality had been increasing until 2000s, and regional competitiveness was growing, and it's quite natural. Once we have seen the oil and gas inequality, we have seen the disproportion in that But then we couldn't stop it. The same thing with Russia, for example, starting from 2010, the inequality between the regions and the cities is growing. It's also growing in the social status, in the poverty. Kazakhstan has started the policy making in eliminating the inequality later on. And you have seen the effect of the equilibrium, let's say. But in Russia, we should understand that last 3, 4 years, Kazakhstan is mitigating the interregional inequality. Our directions are different. If we will look at Uzbekistan, everything is awesome. For example, before that, the head of the state didn't really try to design a policy that would eliminate inequality. For example, it became like Belarus when it was the previous head, but with Mirziyoyev, it had started growing. And that's the conclusion. You have the challenges. So there is a equity efficiency dilemma. If you would like to make it equal, then you have to take away the resources and give it to those who are weaker, let's say. But by doing this, you're going to stagnate the growth of those ones who are strong. If you would like to catch up, you have to understand that you cannot cut or slaughter the chicken that gives you the golden eggs. So that is why in economical side, if we will look from the economical perspective, it is natural to have inequality. In social policy, the measures of the inequalities are identified by social political risks and necessity of producing the human capital. Wherever the monetary funds are not produced and reproduced, it is better to not mess with the popular policies. It's better to think what is going on now and where is it happening, and to see how exactly we could support. What are the measures? Are they changing? Of course, they're changing by time. So that is why I think that we should have smart regional policy. Thank you. These are the best criteria, smart regional policies, and we are going to elaborate on that later on. The next question I would like to ask Farukh Sultanov. When we talk about regional development, the important role is the questions of or issues of the growth of entrepreneurship. And we know that in Tajikistan there are a number of reforms in this sense. And I would like to know what measures had been already implemented, in progress, and if you have something that we could borrow from you. Thank you. Well, I work in IFC, which is the International Finance Corporation, and most of the time our interaction happens in several areas. And mandate of our work, within the mandate of our work, we work with the private sector in investment as well as the support. And we had already implemented 5 reforms, and I would like to name the significant one is the amendment in the tax code, which was welcomed very warmly by the population. And those amendments, we already have the background and the foundation for other policies. We also have helped out with the design of the inclusiveness, and we think that it's quite important to create the opportunities for many for the population, and financial system is important, and the access to the finances is important for the private sector, and private sector always points out this issue. And the inspections, we have decreased the number of the inspections, and we think that it is good that we shall not control too much private sector from the government side. We understand that there should be some control and inspection, but we should find a balance between over-controlling and under-controlling. And we had challenges before the Republic, which were serious, although statistically 65-70% of the private sector of whole economy was the private, the 65 from 65 to 70% of the economy was the private sector, but there were some SMEs, especially the small businesses and enterprises that weren't really growing. The second problem was the number of the private enterprises, or the number of the private enterprises are decreasing, and especially during COVID times. And we are, as Tajikistan, we are in the beginning of our growth and development. If we will, for example, to use economical terms, then GDP per capita is the lowest one in this region, and Tajikistan was one of the two countries that are during the period of pandemic could actually bring to the positive figures, and business is quite sustainable. Thank you. I would like to continue on Tajikistan and ask question. The question on the development of the infrastructure is quite important. What are the projects that you are implementing on the infrastructure development? Because it is quite important foundation for attracting investments. And what plans do you have on infrastructure, and are you planning to enlarge the sphere or sector? Thank you very much for your question. We are working in synergy with all of the objectives that has government before in front of them, which is the security and the where World Bank is one of the donors, and one of the projects that the biggest one, which is the had been developed at USSR times, actually. And I think that it's quite important project, not only for Tajikistan, also for whole region, for trans-border exchange of water and energy. And we have designed to the project CASA 1000, which will help us to trade and between Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and Pakistan, and energy will go through Afghanistan. This is the second project where IFC was engaged quite closely for restructuring the deals and partnership, and there are many projects that had been done through the relations with the government and private sector.
Speaking of other projects, I mean, restoration of power lines, and the restoration of roads. That's, and the power plant restoration projects. Tajikistan is one of the world's few countries which consumes a large share of its energy, and this energy is green. But these facilities have become obsolete because built they were built in Soviet times, and now we're working together with a group from the World Bank, and there are several topics we're working together on with the group from the World Bank, and green energy is one of them. So one of the commitments our country has undertaken under the Paris Agreement is to cut greenhouse emissions. Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan have also undertaken ambitious goals. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are the countries that produce a lot of electricity, and I think these countries might be able to make some wise decisions. And water is the risk learn we have to learn to handle, because water resources could become one of the sources of conflict and division. Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, perfectly illustrate this. There is yet another new actor. I'm referring to Afghanistan. It has its own view on how to separate the water of the Amudarya River. Thank you. Now let's go to another topic. Dear colleague, we have addressed the topic of infrastructure. What's very high on the mind of many investors is the following topic. Central Asia is witnessing the advent of transport corridors and transit corridors. This bank, the IABRA Bank, does it have any plans with regard to the emergence of such transport corridors? Thank you. We do have plans. Of course, we do have plans. We have devised a Eurasian transport concept, and it envisages railway, dry land, seaport infrastructure. It envisages infrastructure, seaport installations, all those things. This concept or this vision spans projects for a total worth of $38 million. What has been already financed by the Eurasian Development Bank, is a total worth of $2.8 million. The airport in Kazakhstan, in the Norzhuli customs processing point. What was also we're planning to invest into a rail track to China. This will enable us to increase the worth of a turnover to up to 20 million a year, with China. That railway segment is 270 kilometers. The Eurasian Bank is not just, is not just here as a contributor, it also fosters projects. And let me just build up and pick up on what the first speaker has said, referring to equality or inequality, fairness or unfairness. We can foster regional development not just biting off pieces of a pie that really belongs to a neighboring region. 4 years ago, there were debates on whether or not we should do this. There were calculations, speculations, whatever. Question: how can we stimulate? How can we drive growth? is a big question. There was an initiative to direct the revenues from the revenue tax, corporate revenue tax to regional authorities, to local communities. Sometimes that that revenue flow was very thin, but we wanted to tell those guys, if you want higher revenues, corporate tax revenues in your region, you should foster business, you should foster companies. That is the message. That is the message. And speaking of diverting taxes, including corporate taxes, to the needs of local authorities, it's something that was of great help to some of the local authorities, and now we can calculate the percentage of growth of local budgets thanks to this redirection. Speaking of the water balance, the bank, our bank has run research on the water and energy balance. Things are pretty complex. So our finding is, if each country is following its own, then it will have capital investments of $60 billion US. If we move together, then we can then 1/3 of this sum could be required. But if we build things together, if we spearhead things together, then of course we could streamline things, we can shape things better, and we can achieve water and energy stability, something we're working for, something we're dreaming of for our region. So now we are talking, you've mentioned a coordination council. Yes, it's something we could do. Are there any other predicaments you run into in terms of water, in terms of energy, in terms of infrastructure? So because these things involve different countries, what is it you would suggest? I disagree with most projects, with most experts who affirm that disagreements throttle the development of projects. They start paying off. Projects start paying off when they start transferring goods. And transferring goods start appearing whenever there are markets. We are in the middle of two oceans, like the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. So what we should focus on is not just is complementarity, mutual exclusion, but complementarity. Sometimes in tourism, one country may complain, our country has built this or that road, but passengers or tourists are traveling to another country. But the real predicament here, the real problem here is like this. Corridors cut through several countries at the same time, coordination, and this requires coordination. Because projects need budget financing and budget funding. Railways, for instance, can never be fully funded by private companies. They have to be funded by governments. And government it implies taxes, taxpayers' money. And here we could rely on government private partnerships. So we have to synchronize, but the budgets, national budgets, can be different. Different payments can be different. Finance ministries are different. So we need to develop trans-border PPPs. So we are now developing trans-border PPP projects, and there is a high demand for the development of trans-border PPP legislation. If we fail, if we don't fail, if we succeed, then we'll be able to coordinate the funding of such sophisticated projects, because the effects, the benefits are really multi-layer, and the benefit most various stakeholders. So question number one. Question number two is coordination. I'm referring to the soft infrastructure like the customs clearance, customs transit times, customs clearance times. The reliance automation, customs automation. All of this belongs to the so-called soft infrastructure, and all requires coordinated efforts on the parts of various stakeholders, government stakeholders. Thank you. Let me just, so our colleague has illustrated this, that, tax revenues have been are being transferred to the regions. Could you cite Russian examples just to share, to complement the picture? When I heard your options, I was almost I was almost about to smile, to show a bad smile. Speaking of the corporate revenue tax. So out of the 8, so the tax rate was 20%. 18% of this tax goes to the federal the federal budget, and only 2 travels to the regions. And local stakeholders, local companies generate too low revenue compared to like iron foundries, for instance. Federals, let me just. The problem, what is the problem? Those who are falling behind, they don't generate any tax base, whatever taxes you empower them with. But, it takes time. This is, it's a very complex story. Sorry, it's a very complex story. Quick and fast solutions won't help you. Question is, this revenue differentiation, what are the Russian regions where, the Ingush Republic, the Chechen Republic, the Tyumen Republic in Russia, you don't have so many tiny republics which don't produce anything. And we in Russia have over 80 constituent entities that produce virtually nothing. A solution could be just glue together 10 tiny regions, underperforming regions, and you will get some high figures. But we in Russia have regional identities. People want to live on their own territories, and there is also the ethnic component to those to those projects. So let's work with what we have. This is my solution. Yeah, Faruk, you just wanted to give you a comment. I just wanted to add this. There are also challenges that have to do with the efficient use of the existing infrastructure. Say we take a look at the statistics of using airports, roads. They do experience peak loads, but they don't make all of the difference. Take a look at the power generation. There is a very high potential we could tap into our power generation capabilities. and we could sell even electricity. I was very happy to hear this point at the plenary session. I'm very happy to take note of the fact that the leaders of our countries they have looks like they've found better understanding, and this, of course, will have a positive impact on our joint projects. It's very good time for us to overcome whatever difficulties there are. Climate change is another issue I'd like to raise, because Kazakhstan, is and its consequences are making themselves felt. They're playing out in Kazakhstan quite hard. Dear colleague Marcel, recently you've written about the consequences and the impact of climate change. So what climate action would you suggest to counter climate change? Yes, of course. This problem was discussed during the plenary session and at panels referring to the climate change and the climate change related risks faced by our countries. So as a driving force, or as a locomotive, or as a flagship, the flagship here is the European Union, in terms of raising the right questions and proposing the right solutions. But a lot of solutions used by the European Union, they are inapplicable or hardly applicable in Central Asian countries, because the average GDPs, per capita income, is very different. $2,000 or $3,000, for instance. Eastern Europe's average GDP is $40,000 to $50,000 per capita. So there is a huge gap. Every time we're talking about renewables or the green transition, these are important factors we must factor in or take into account. But this is the problem of the richer countries. The solutions which are more relevant for Russia and for the Central Asian countries are different. And there is, of course, a difference between the energy deficient and the so-called energy proficient countries, or energy abundant countries, which, of course, implies various approaches. So here is something we should use. We should focus on from the standpoint of if we are to reduce greenhouse emissions, so they have to be economically feasible. If we are talking about the reduction in the investments we need to reduce greenhouse emissions per capita, there is talk, of course, of fostering and promoting renewables, or bringing the share of greenhouse gases, the share of renewables to 45%. Now I'm referring to using coal in energy generation. I think we could set a goal here, of reducing coal for energy generation in energy generation. But this might entail social issues for impacts on the society. Another course to take is to rely more on gas, on natural gas, for energy generation. It makes more economic sense for Russia to export gas to Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, because the infrastructure is there. But what really matters is the prices and the pricing. The natural prices for natural gas are low in those countries, and importing it from other countries would be pretty pricey. And the current developments, in view of the current developments, we're going to witness a growth in energy prices. So if we are to efficiently address climate-related matters, we'll have to put up with growing energy prices. So without going into detail, so what is the problem about, I'm referring to water distribution. Due to geographic climate and other factors, water is in high demand, and due to the rising temperatures, water is going to be in high demand. There's going to be a shortage of water. So, and now we're witnessing a dilemma. How to use water. Should we use it in Kyrgyzstan for energy generation? Bishkek, the city of Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, is experiencing a shortage in water because we have to create different water. We have to use water more efficiently, the water we have that already has for agricultural needs, for ordinary people's needs. And we'll have to supplant water-driven energy generation through some other energy sources, but not necessarily through green renewable energies, though I don't want to sound too obsolete.
I would like to know your opinion. You said that 45% is the share in the energy consumption. Do you think that we can really reach that? 45 no until 2030. This is the aim that countries might reach. We're talking right now, we're debating around 42, and in 2022 it was 22%. These are the political objectives within the European Union. So there's an internal debate regarding the differentiation between different countries. Somebody has 60%, some countries have 10%. When we talk about 45%, somebody already fulfilled this and reached this number. But this is the internal policy, and some probably might even decrease. I don't really think that it is direct objective that other countries should adopt and more mandatory to adopt. But in European Union, since they are the countries that has the maximum share of the, for example, the prices, due to the prices, the energy, electric energy is getting higher and higher. And for other countries, for example, if we will compare Germany and Russia, it's completely different prices. So that is why we could see that the biggest share of the renewable energy will depend on the feasibility and the resources, and the sources of this energy also will depend on the cost, or the prices might be high tomorrow and the day after tomorrow it will drop. So everything will depend on the generation, which might be comparable right now. It's comparable with the traditional sources of energy, but we need to contribute a lot into the nets. If your energy system is dependent on the localized low capacity stations, it should be connected. You cannot build a big lab and then just solve this issue. You need to contribute and invest a lot into the network and into the network as well as the system. And there is a problem with the generation. There should be reservoirs, and they should be standing on something. And storage, we don't really have efficient system for the storage of the energy. So that is why we will. That is also an issue. For example, the batteries. If we will touch upon the batteries, well, we need to think about lots of issues and aspects. We need to research this experience, and we should be thinking from the lens of the feasibility, economical feasibility, since objectively our countries has the lower GDP per capita. We need to think about the feasibility and how relevant it is for us. Natalia Vasilyevna, we cannot abide or bypass topics of the geopolitical situation and regions. Well, this is the issue of Karaganda. I cannot be brief. For Russia, it's going to be quicker due to Kosbas, for example. It's the half of the share, 50% of shares of the coal mining, and if they were paying full price for the traffic for 4,000 kilometers till the port, then half of the Russian coal is exported, and reliefs and the bonuses and the shutting down of the Japanese and Southern Korean stations, and we are competing. We actually look pretty good if we will look at the relations between the prices and the costs, and we have already shut it down the Trans-Siberian route, and we also need to look at the salaries, because in Kosbas, for example, those who are working there, they're not paid well. The environmental situation is quite bad one, and we need to make decisions regarding Karaganda in order to have conclusions, how feasible and how logical was the policy. In Russia, Trans-Siberian route had been shut down, and it might happen in Kazakhstan, in Kuzbas, while I'm alive, by the way. We will hope that we won't have these issues and we will be able to mitigate. Andrei Markovich, we've already started debating and elaborating on the low carbon policy, and how do you see, what are the perspectives? Actually, it's very important question. There is no one opinion, let's say. In France, there was a book published regarding the water energy, and it says that those countries that are developing quite quickly, they only show the half of the cycle. It is ecologically pure energy, but the problem is, in order to produce the water stations, you have to extract the rare metals, which is ecologically quite it spoils environment, and these lands that we are extracting those metals or producing or refining those metals will not be usable for agriculture purposes. Whenever we talk about the wind stations, we're talking about, we need to think about, when we look at the carbon neutrality or decreasing the carbon emissions, we need to start counting not only at one phase, but starting to look at it from the where it does originate and where it does finalize. So all of the phases of the technological cycle. What some countries do in order to neutralize or decrease the carbon emissions, what do? They take the phases that would really spoil the environment and place it in other countries. So by doing this, they would reach the goals of net zero carbon. But It is not the balanced development in the energy sector, and our aim is to make it in a way that all countries would think about through comparability. So nowadays we're talking about the trends of the world and regional development. We're going from one polar development to the multi-vectoral development. So that is why we need to think about that. Most of the times when we look at the GDP per capita, for example, we see that the 7 developed countries are quite high rather than other countries. And in this case, we need to look how inevitable is that. And the countries of BRICS are actually emitting more if we will look at other countries. So everything is quite comparable. And on this background of the economical growth of other countries, this inequality of the spread of the resources will be visible. So that is why there should be balance. So actively, we see ESG trends regarding the carbon neutrality and net zero carbon, and their challenges on the human resources, on technologies. And I would like to know the new mechanisms of the management which will allow us to introduce the ratings and rankings. So I would like to know what are the perspectives. What's your opinion? Well, for this question, I would like to express my gratitude. In Russian Federation right now, we are facing polarization of the expert society. Many experts are talking about problematics of ESG is actually or something what was imposed from abroad, and we shall not deal with it. But philosophy of ESG is quite, from my point of view, is broader than we perceive it. So what was the evolution? In the mid of the 50s, we have seen corporate social responsibility, and people have understood that we need to try to step away from the financial fetishism, and we should start think about sustainability. If you remember Harlan Brundtland, when he have voiced his theory and Norton Kaplan's work on the balanced system of the indicators, ESG wasn't introduced yet, but now we're talking about ESG. Lots of organizations and the states are talking about the ESG. It's just a ranking, but it is not quite true. When we talk about ESGs, we talk about the philosophy of the sustainable development. It's the alignment of the business and civil societies. And another triad is connected to the idea that we have to bring the new generations in this paradigm and structure of the competences. It's the holistic approach on the values, which means that we need to decline from the short-term thinking and try to think in a global perspectives and longer-term perspectives. And it's different communication. It's communication of different level. When we think about triads of the development, using these mechanisms, we can actually also design all of the objectives for policies, and it cascades itself to different sustainable development objectives. When we think about qualities of the living or quality of the cities or lives in the cities, and we need to refuse thinking in short-term perspectives. So, for example, this is the trust. Let's say this paper is the trust. We have lost this trust by crumbling it, and now we're trying to rebuild it. If we look at the paper, we see that we cannot fully rebuild it. So that is why we need to think about solving ecological, economical, and sustainable problems. I think that I should conclude with words that I will remember Omar Khayyam's words. And in Tajikistan, there's a sculpture that was dedicated to him. Those competences that we need to form now was actually already voiced. Omar Khayyam said that money will not help us when we will be dead, and it cannot replace the love. Why we have stopped being human? Next question, Hassan Yerbalovich, I'd like to ask you. We know that the organization has the principles of ESG. You have the number of the projects that you're implementing. I would like to know what projects do you implement in the decarbonization in order to achieve the decarbonization objectives, and what plans do you have? Thank you for your question. So money is the fetish. Well, at the end of the May, we were in Greenfest, and I have seen some video clips, quite interesting ones, I should say. It's the city of 2070s, and a boy asks, he's strolling around, probably he has allergy, he comes home and he takes off his equipment to breathe, and he asks his granddad, you knew that we will have these consequences and I will not be able to breathe. Why did you do that? Why did you burn coal? And granddad said that we had to do it. Regarding the decarbonization, Eurasian Bank of the Reconstruction and Development says that had already invested millions and millions of dollars, and for the solar electric stations, the projects for the wind stations as well as the solar electric stations had been already introduced and implemented partially. Some of these substations had been already installed in some of the countries. From the economical point of view, investors are different right now. They don't want to invest into companies that are not caring about standard sustainable development. They are deceiving their clients or not complying with the due diligence, let's say. And this is how we're trying to solve problems. And how market exactly reaches those trillions and trillions of US dollars. You have to comply with standards. Probably maybe not from the ethical point of view, but if you don't have the ethical point of views, then probably in order to reach those amount of money. So that is why, as the EBRD, as the financial institute, does takes into consideration all of those issues. As an addition, I would like to say that there is a phenomenon as the greenium, which is the sort of a discount for ecological thinking, let's say, and these discounts are given by the market, and it's formed in our countries, in this region, mostly through government development, whereas abroad, for example, in more developed countries, those kind of phenomenon lies under all of the projects. I'll always try to land all of the questions in our regions. Whenever we talk about decarbonization, we only have central bodies, let's say, they're always in the center. In regional perspectives, I'm not sure how it is discussed in Russia, how to integrate it into our talks and debates. Well, first of all, we cannot discuss it without contributing monetarily or financially. In Russia, it had been implemented by Fortum. Now Fortum left Russia. the share of the alternative energy without hydro stations is 1% all of the production of Russia. Now we used to think about ESG, but now unfortunately we cannot afford ourselves to think about, and we cannot even mention it on the level of the government. I understood. Farukh, I'll ask you the question on the ecological sustainability. I know that investors are already raising these issues. What projects do you have in your country? Thank you for your question. Well, as an addition to previous speakers, I shall say on the shifts, the big shifts and transitions, everyone is bearing responsibilities, government, private companies, large companies, and the stocks. And it seems like that not having ESG as the standard is not profitable now. Thanks for admitting that, because counteragents is going to talk about, buyer is going to talk about, customer is going to talk about. So that is why, as bank IFC, we cannot bypass this process. So 100% of the financing is going to be purely green, and now we are going ahead of our schedule. Right now, 80% of everything we're allocating is green. And probably talking about, when I talk about ESG, I would also note the fact of the opportunities, the possibilities to manage own risks in Kazakhstan. For example, thanks to Eurasian Bank, I have gone through your reports on this region. Your report was saying that because of the introduction of the carbon tax starting 2026, it seems like Kazakh business will lose $250 million per year, and maybe more.
So today's transition and the introduction of new standards is more of a necessity than just some idle thing we might dabble in. In Tajikistan, we operate at all of the levels. We work together with regulators. We render technical assistance to our national bank. We're working together with our ministers. We're helping them to introduce the green economy standard we have adopted. We also work together with individual banks. We try assessing, devising new products, try helping banks issue green bonds, green loans and green loans, and green. We also try to create more favorable conditions for the issuance of green and blue bonds. But you cannot fight this war or fight alone. So there is a bad need of political will to ensure this transition. The situation might be better, might be easier here, because the tasks and the mission, the mission of transiting, of converting industries to new practices is easier because the percentage of green environment, of green technologies and green economy is larger. But of course we have to take a look at how much money flows to R&D, because R&Ds are always in transition, are always evolving, and all of this has an impact on the final price for kilowatt per hour. We also have a product called Skerin Solar. We have run a number of tenders. We have helped Uzbekistan announce tenders for the purchase of green energy. If we take a look at the bid winners and the best bidders, so over the past several years, the price per kilowatt dropped from 3 to 1 point something. 1.8 cents per kilowatt. It was in Uzbekistan. Again, we've helped Uzbekistan down the road, and it's quite a good thing. Speaking of ESG and of the development of green economy, things are evolving. We are faring better and better. But of course, there is great uncertainty, and anything may happen, of course, further down the road. I've just been present at a session on artificial intelligence, and that session mentioned, artificial intelligence might pose high risks than risk transition. Marcel, there is a popular trend focused on blue transition. What tools could we use to deliver investments? Green financing, green funding, blue funding. Every time we hear this, we paint beautiful pictures in our mind. But what really comes down to is that we need to have a very good understanding of what's behind them. Our colleague has been talking about the ESG philosophy. So again, we have to have a very good idea of what specific things, what things can be implemented specifically. Speaking of Russia and ESG, on the one hand, the ESG-related situation in Russia is the ESG momentum is being preserved, but on the other hand, Russia's economy is getting more and more isolated. If we're talking about ISGs used by global investors, so we have to say that Russian companies are not listed on European markets. There are no international investors willing to buy Russian stock, and Russian companies don't do any reporting on ESG-related matters. So Russian companies have been emphasizing this thing, and they've been making progress. They used to make progress, and it continues being a priority, but not a kind of the number one priority. Speaking of the trans-border carbon regulation in Europe, Russia, there is also a lot of talk in Russia. People were wondering how many billions of dollars they'd have to pay should the European Union introduce this CBAM initiative, and there was talk like of Russia Russia might launch a carbon market of its own, just not to have to pay. It was made absolute economic sense, but now the European Union has introduced an embargo, a ban on metals like on other staple imports. And this question is no longer relevant, is immediately off the agenda. And now there is also talk about, about green bonds or blue bonds. Russia has already issued green bonds, but as like on an individual basis, just to bolster their image internationally. And this was done, on the philosophical level, and the level of philosophical approaches, acting on the assumption that social matters, economic matters should be on the agenda. They were tying it in with green bonds. They tied green bonds with social matters, the social agenda, and the environmental agenda. So we're used to having standard instruments, or standard tools like, so for instance, we have to launch trading with greenhouse or carbon bonds or carbon markets. But countries need to have really very feasible, very tangible motivation to be involved in all this. I'm an economist, and I see at things through economic goggles. There have to be incentives, motivation tools and incentivizing tools can be different. But they have to be. So there was recently there was talk in Russia, of the possibility of modifying the oil and gas markets to reduce emissions. Like if we reduce emissions in coal, or reduce taxes on coal, this might give us benefits elsewhere. Or like tinkering with the market of metals, for instance. In other words, I'm referring to tools that might incentivize companies and markets. These incentives can be different and can be diverse, but they must all be underlined by economic stimuli, but not just purely government decisions. But dear colleague, we are growing more and more aware of the fact that regional economies, local economies are not tapping into the green trends. Your institute has been assessing government programs. What is your take, on the prospects of regions, of the region's potential in terms of reaching low carbon share, low carbon neutrality? How are the regions doing? Is there any chance to create a really even playing field? Is there any chance of bringing different regional actors together, using common goals? It's quite a challenge. The answer is no, we cannot really bring everyone together under the umbrella of uniform mechanisms. Speaking of Kazakhstan, we've witnessed, a story. It's a very appropriate story of the so-called hearing, or states of governments or nations capable of hearing. If we use it if we copy this experience, of the nations capable of hearing, then there will be progress. Unfortunately, the assessment methodology is not immune to crisis, to criticism. Even the indicators we use to assess the efficiency of government programs is not scientifically feasible, 100% scientifically feasible, scientifically watertight. Sometimes, instead of looking for alternative sources of funding, we often turn to the state, start begging, for funding. And if there are issues with the taxation, then it showcases that this program is not watertight. So we have to look for ways. That's why I keep saying the government, private business, and social society. So Winston Churchill, he didn't like the Soviet Union, but he was a fair person. What is the difference between a politician and a public figure, a government figure, prominent government figure? His answer was, a politician thinks of the next elections, while a prominent public figure thinks ahead, for generations ahead. So this is what comes down to, a real national public figure, prominent public figure is someone who thinks for generations ahead. So what can we do to attract government's attention to environment? So we have to, what can Russia do? First, it must bring to an end or put a stop to what was started in February last year, and then keep thinking of what to do next. Central Asia, as I have mentioned, has been growing more and more attractive for investors. So my question is, what steps should Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries take in order to tap into their potential as efficiently as they can, and just for this potential to benefit all of the Central Asian countries? Answer. Ms. Zubarevich's answer is, I think you'll make it. First thing, my second point, there will always be a shortage in funding and financing. Your priority number one is to make a wise use of what you have, as few unwise solutions as possible. Poverty, the environmental agenda is not really relevant. So it would be best for you to become richer. It would be best for your country population to grow richer. But of course, you can't really hope that tomorrow the Kyrgyz, the Kazakhs, the Russians will pull efforts together and do everything to achieve ESG goals, because Europe, so first get richer, get wiser, and thirdly get debate things, talk about things, and not make promises you can't really act on, you can't really fulfill. Not promise the moons from or the stars from the heaven, from the skies. Be realistic in your promises. Yeah, there is an understanding, a general understanding that we have to promote businesses. We have to create favorable conditions for businesses because they can be flexible. We have to use finance. We have to use taxation to promote business, to stimulate business, including education via education. The Republic of Uzbekistan has adopted a new law on public service. And, the responsibility, the law prioritizes the responsibility for lack of action, something we don't have in Russia. Say there is a project, it is submitted to a public official. He starts being very cautious. He starts thinking, he or she, that public official bears no responsibility for inaction. And he or she is prone to say no to the project. So we have to really create some legislative leeway in terms of the right to make mistakes. If we do it, then we'll achieve success. What is your answer? Keep working, and letting private businesses live and work. Marcel, what is your remarks, please? For all Central Asian countries and for Kazakhstan and for Russia, including Russia, so what's going on creates huge opportunities for our countries, because companies leaving Russia, they come to Kazakhstan. And besides, speaking of Russia, Russia is switching gears eastwards, and there is a growing demand in processing goods, in importing goods, in carrying goods, and all those goods can be carried via Central Asia. And it's something companies, private businesses could tap into and develop their capabilities. Speaking of the negative trends, in Russia's economy, they could be benefited. They could benefit, say, Central Asian economies. Sorry. I'd like to adjourn at this point. We have managed to address the topics of global importance, and we've learned what we've seen the individual regions take on them. I'd like to thank all of our speakers now, our contributors, for addressing all of the matters in our agenda. Thank you.
And experts at the Congress Center on June 8th and 9th for discussions focusing on challenges and solutions in foreign policy, international security, finance, sustainability and climate change. Network with visionary collaborators in the bold and futuristic city of Astana. Make an impact in the Astana International Forum 2023.
You can change the world around you starting now. For example, buy a car in a day and give it to a close one. Or move into a new apartment where everyone will have their own room. Or start your own business.